Hey, I'm glad you're here. This is the 25th episode of the Deepening Place podcast, and in a lot of ways, it is what I was aiming for when I started last March. Two people sitting across from each other, talking about thoughts, ideas, opinions, without the fear of being judged. When I say meet me in the middle for a love revolution, this is what I'm talking about. And it's going to take all of us gathering with our friends and in our communities to stop judging each other and start hearing each other. That's going to be the love revolution. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to the Deepening Place. Today my guest is Angela Wetzel. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Angela. Nice name.
Yeah, we can't forget each other's names. So I met you on Instagram.
Yes.
Nearly everyone I interview these days I've met online, and 2020 has been very helpful with that because it kind of forced me to reach out to more people online. It's been really fun to get to know people. And you posted something the other day that made me so happy. And so I just reached out to you to see if maybe we could have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love to talk about it. And my goal is just kind of like to continually offer like an olive branch, like across the political lines, so that we can do a lot more healing and stop allowing the political division to cause such like rift in our country and in our consciousness. I'm going to try to be as honest as I possibly can from my own body of work and what I've been studying. And the goal is really just to help people to tap into their own truth, because I feel like that's where we need to go.
So before we get too far into this, can you tell people a little bit about what you do?
So I am a life and love coach, and I specialize in pretty much like codependency and love addiction with emphasis on trauma-informed work and attachment styles. That being said, I'm also a writer, and the kind of things that I study are both spiritual and psychological and biological in nature. So what I try to do, or I guess sort of what's ended up happening, is I have been studying a lot of spiritual texts and even history and psychological work, and I've found correlations between almost everything. I found that as humans, we're bound by universal laws, and there aren't really exceptions to that. So I pretty much try to coach people from where they're at. If they are not at a place where they want to talk about things spiritually or energetically, then I can talk about the psychology of it. So I've sort of become versed in both. And my background, actually, I've been an actor, kind of creative child, writing books and poetry from a young age, singing, like dancing, straight up goofball, kind of just like totally irreverent. And then I joined the military and became a Korean linguist. So I was a sergeant in the US Army and voice interceptor. So top secret clearance and a whole perspective that came through that, and working for the government and with the Office of Naval Intelligence. And then I left all that. It was the same time my marriage was kind of crumbling and pretty much like what I thought was the life I wanted. It was not the life I wanted. And I went back into acting. And long story short, essentially I had a retina, my left retina, spontaneously partially detached. So I nearly went blind in my left eye. And that was right as I was graduating from NYU, their acting program. And it sent me down an entirely different path of learning and discovering kind of the fishbowl, I guess, that I was living in perspective, my life, and a victim perspective that I had been raised with that I didn't even identify or realize that I had, which began my work into love addiction and codependence.
One of my favorite things to do is talk to people who are free thinkers. And it sounds like the events of your life have led you to a place where you will dig around for your own information and form your own opinions.
Yes.
One thing that you just said that stood out to me was the thing about there are universal laws that everyone is kind of subject to. One that and I don't know what law this would be. One thing that I've thought since 5 years ago when this kind of started happening is we can't hate. And I don't know what law that would fall under. But the thing that has just gone over in my spirit, I guess, for the last 5 years is hate yields bad fruit. I guess we'll just go over your list. We kind of started, the second item on your list is hating others. Did you have anything else to say about that?
Well, what you kind of talked about, I think, is like the law of relativity. It's like nothing and no one is inherently good or bad. So it's like when we sort of pigeonhole people and only look at certain aspects of them, it's like we deny what is good in them, and we also deny what's good with us. So one of the first things that I actually wanted to talk about was perception. Perception really rules our world. Like, our perception is based on beliefs that we have either inherited. Our perception's based on trauma. It's based on our emotional state. It's based on our physiological state. So how we're feeling in the world on a given day is going to color our perspective, and what our own triggers and our own wounds and our own fears are going to color that perspective as well. And given that, when we realize that perspective is so powerful, based on how we perceive our world is going to dictate how we behave in our world. And given that it is so powerful, when we don't have an awareness around our perception or what we're perceiving, it makes us highly vulnerable to being controlled by others that would then control our perspective. And it makes me think of the Socrates like cave analogy, where there's people sitting in the cave and they're sort of watching a puppet show. Well, now we would liken that to watching TV and just absorbing everything that we're being told blindly, just listening to it. And a lot of people are comfortable here because they're not questioning that. And then there's another group of people that will then go further into doing the research, and they'll be like, well, I didn't see this on mainstream media, and it seemed to have come from a reliable source. And so they're also letting that into their mental and spiritual boundaries without actually tasting the energy or being like, is this actually true? What is the truth here? And so it's like another level of believing that you're still beyond the puppet show when you're still in it. And then there's like starting to, and like, I actually think this is happening a lot, where people are realizing that we're actually being fed a lot of crap from people that have their own agendas. And what's happening is a lot of people, I mean, this is a sense that I get, I would have identified myself as being really liberal, and that's how I've like voted in the past. But this two-party system is not working, and it's truly a two-party oligarchy. Like, we're supposed to be a republic. It's not really the case. And I think people are waking up from this disillusioned state of that naivete of thinking that just because we vote for someone that they're going to vote as we wish they would vote. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that they're actually on our side or looking out for our best interests when it comes to like the influence of power or money or how it's going to help their family as opposed to their constituents.
Yeah. When you're talking about perception and beliefs, and this has happened to me so many times over the years when I'm hearing someone talk like that and I'm going, yes, that's exactly right. And then I realize they're only applying this observation to the other side.
Yes.
And I just wanted to say that for any listeners, if you happen to be on the right and you heard that, you're nodding your head going, yes, everyone on the left is like that. And if you're on the left listening to it, you're nodding your head saying, yes, everyone on the right is like that. So what do you do about that?
Well, here's the thing. We need to kind of skip over this arrogance that we actually know what the fuck is going on, because people are scared and they don't know what's going on. But I feel as though everyone sort of has this sense that, to quote Shakespeare, like something's rotten in Denmark, it's the US, like something is going on that doesn't feel right. And I believe that people are feeling that intuitively, but they're looking for concrete evidence to prove that what they're feeling is accurate. And so there's so many people that are disillusioned by the media, and they're going, something's not right because I'm hearing so many conflicting stories, and Also, what I find fascinating is that there always seems to be two sides to every story when it comes to anything that has to do with money and power. So it's like vaccines are great, vaccines are awful, vaccines are, killing our children, vaccines are saving our children. Gas is polluting our planet. Lithium and ion batteries are the answer. No, the ion batteries are the devil. They're destroying our rainforests. Environmentalism, global warming, or we're actually polluting our planet. Oh, that's fake news. There's nothing wrong. Continue business as usual. That's just people fear mongering about the environment. So it's like, what is it? Is it that there's actually maybe truth in all of it, and that what we're seeing is people that are in power or afraid of losing their power or afraid of losing the way that they make money and they don't really want to change? Are they guiding our perspective in a way that keeps them safe as opposed to doing what's right for the whole?
In some of the earlier episodes of The Deepening Place, I talked about the extremes of belief and how in times of fear or uncertainty, people cling to their beliefs. And I really seen that a lot here. Like, we have to pick a side. I have to be on the left or I have to be on the right. And then what happens is you kind of enter this space of, would it be cognitive dissonance when you have to try to make things make sense based on your beliefs?
Well, it's almost like confirmation bias. So, I mean, think about it. If we were to zoom out and actually think about the precarious nature or like even how life is happening, like I think it's important to do that. Right now, we are literally on solid ground on a planet that's a sphere that is literally suspended in space. We don't often stop and think about it. And I think it's important to be like that's kind of crazy. There's so many processes that are happening and happening unconsciously. Like, we're at any given time, like 96% unconscious. And we're very much both like human animal and human spirit. And what we're trying to navigate is like a balance between those two things. But that being said, like going back, like people, our egos, we're always looking for safety and what is certain. And so in such an uncertain world, when you think about it, it's like we really need to hold on to something. And oftentimes it's our belief of what is right and what feels good to attach to. And the unknown is like not a cool, safe place for the ego or the subconscious. Like, the subconscious does not like that because it's not predictable. And so when times become even more uncertain, we tend to and it's so human, right? All of us want to hold on to, clamp down on what we have thought is certain. Well, I identified this way and this feels right, so I'm going to continue doing that because it feels safe. And all my friends are doing it and everyone I know, and it's how I've always voted. And it's also confirmation bias. It's what I surround myself with. Also, when I listen to opposing opinions, like, that's painful to my brain because depending on what we're listening to, it might actually be an extremist or more extreme version of opposition that doesn't take the other side into account. And so it doesn't feel like truth either necessarily, because when we are viewed through a distrustful lens or a lens that we're stupid or ignorant or we're not woke, it's like really hard to try to listen to what other people are saying, because what happens is when we're viewed as like the enemy or someone is against us, we naturally will go into a defensive protective posture, which means like, no, I'm not going to let in any of that. That's bad. That's wrong. And also it's painful for people to speak about me this way or my beliefs, or it's polarizing instead of inviting conversation. And what we need to do is like come back more to the middle.
You don't mean to be in the center politically, but meet me in the middle for a love revolution.
Yeah.
And it's almost like when you are working with couples. I mean, you have to come to a point where you're both sitting at the table with the mediator and you're talking and maybe learning to understand each other's perspective rather than arguing.
Yeah, and we cannot have constructive conversation when we're triggered and pointing fingers at the other as if they're the enemy. And even though that pain we feel within us, it's easy for the ego to project outwards and be like, you are the source of my pain.
And nobody's really naming the elephant in the room, which is Donald Trump was a really hated person.
Yeah.
The left hates Donald Trump.
Right.
And it started that way, and now it's sort of evolved to anyone who supported him was hated, anyone who voted for him was hated, and now it's even if you don't hate him, you're hated. You have
Right.
to hate them. I'm
Right.
really concerned if they hired us to come in and help with this unity thing in your first board meeting. If, say, Joe Biden is really sincere about his call for unity and wanting to be everyone's
Mhm.
president,
Mhm.
like, what are a few things you would put on his agenda list?
Wow, that's such a huge question, but it's a great question. I mean, here's the thing. Based on the fact that we are mostly unconscious human beings with brief blips of consciousness where our prefrontal cortex is coming online and we're actually at choice, if we are to villainize people, it's difficult to come back from that and to also have compassion for ourselves. So I would say it's important, if we're going to unify this country, is not to villainize Donald Trump for the person that he was because he's a human with his own background and experience and trauma and way of thinking and beliefs in the world, whether or not they've served the world or not, or the country, and that's arguable depending on who you talk to. But there's a whole picture of a human being. Donald Trump isn't purely evil, otherwise he wouldn't have made it this far in life. And he's not purely good either. And so if we only frame one aspect of a person, let's say on the left, we just say Donald Trump's a fucking asshole, and on the right, if we just say he is our savior and he's like the only thing standing between us and New World Order, then we're actually kind of missing, I think, a lot of other truths that are there as well. I would just say, let's not villainize people for voting for him or liking him, because I have my own like ego and my own knee-jerk response to him as a human being and the things that I have seen, but it's through my own lens and perspective and confirmation bias as well. So I'm willing to go outside of that and say that it's important to not only see him as a whole human being for everything, for every good he's done and bad, but also to see ourselves the same way. And so the question isn't like who did what and the people that voted for him like fucked up and this was all wrong, and to kind of dwell on it. It's kind of like, where are we now and what choices do we have now? So let's really focus on the present moment. What's good, let's keep doing it. What isn't working so well, let's try to adjust that and do better. And so I definitely believe that this is beyond identifying with political parties now. I think a lot of people are feeling like division isn't going to do this country any good. And we've seen so much division that's happened over the past 4 years. Was it necessarily all bad? No, I believe it brought up so much of like the shadow, like the parts of our country and ourselves that we don't really like. And it's showing us like where we are as a country. If we view our country like as an organism or as a whole entity, we're like kind of seeing what's healed and what's unhealed. So I think it's important that every thing that happens or every leader that we have is at least like tapping into, I don't know the word, like maybe the zeitgeist, so like the pulse. Like there's definitely a reason why Donald Trump was elected and why people resonated with him. And to just say that people are fucking crazy or they're not awake or they don't know any better is really not necessarily fair, because I think you and I both know that people on both sides of the table are identifying themselves as free thinkers. That one shaman guy said.
You're talking about the guy that was in the Capitol with the horns?
Yeah, with the horns and the war paint. And it's what I like to do is become more curious and say, what is his perspective, or what has caused him to believe what he has believed so passionately that he showed up at the Capitol to fight for his country? I want to look at that, and I want to look at people on both sides. Is it possible that we awaken in patches and that we see certain truths and that we're opposed to other truths, and that there's really a bigger picture going on?
I completely agree with that. And I think that's one reason why it's so important to test our ideas and our theories in real time. Otherwise, we don't know if something we're thinking is crazy, or Maybe I went down a rabbit hole that really has no truth to it, and I can bounce that off of people. And that is one of the reasons why the censorship thing is such a shocker to me. And I
Yeah.
think it's a really dangerous thing that we're doing.
I do agree with that. And I do see both sides on that as well. Like I see the fear that people will use platforms to amp up hate and to organize like these hateful things. And yet it's kind of like if people are going to do that, they're going to find a way. And maybe the idea is not to make it convenient. But I do think it's important that we don't allow our fear to dictate what other people are free to do.
Framing it this way, as mental health professionals, we've heard about, read about, and these are common concepts to most people, are the scapegoat and the black sheep, the shadow. And from a spiritual perspective, I've spent 5 years hearing about white supremacists. And what I'm concerned with is we keep pushing conservatives back further and further into the shadows, where it's quite possible that some form of radicalism exists. And then we're going to have this self-fulfilling prophecy. They're going to come bursting out of the dark shadows. That's another problem I have with the censorship. I mean, at least let people get their ideas out,
right?
Let them be checked, let them learn from others who say that's ridiculous. But to push people back into the shadow, what exists back there in the dark? And that's the only place they're free to speak.
Yeah. And and you know this as well as I do, that we can't really heal anything that hasn't come to the surface for healing. So if we're repressing or suppressing something because of our own fear of it or because of our own disgust or judgment of it, there's absolutely no way that we can let the light get in there and let any kind of truth get in there so that it can alchemize into something else, which is like a more mature perspective, perhaps.
Yeah. And that more mature perspective, it doesn't come from someone being parental. And I think both sides are kind of guilty of this. I come at it like I know better. I know more than you, and I'm going to explain it to you. And if we could kind of drop down into that neutral adult to adult and exchange ideas and use more I statements than they said, just coming to the table and having conversations in our communities.
I so wholeheartedly agree with you. Listening more and like putting the tape over our mouths and listening. And if we have reactions, kind of dealing with those, our own biases within ourselves and calming ourselves so that we can also speak in like nonviolent terms. And what I've seen happen with the news and like what you were talking about is like this white supremacy. I believe that it does exist in pockets, sure, but is it as rampant as we're being told? I haven't seen it. It's not really my reality. I'm also not a Black person, so I can't speak to their experience. But it's like what I think that we're being shown has been using our own division against us in areas that are like our hottest, most triggered topics. So, and then they show that and they show like the extremism, and then the media is also like kind of sensational, and they're like, this is what sells and ratings and how do we get people to watch, and it's kind of feeding this addiction into drama. It's almost like the Real Housewives instead, but it's like the real United States of America. So we're kind of seeing like this scripted chaos where certain bits of inflammatory clashes are being highlighted, and then we're like, holy shit, like this Antifa and like white supremacists, and it's like, oh, and now they're infiltrating this, and this happened because of the other side doing it. Both sides have exactly the same narrative.
Yeah. For the record, I mean, mainstream media, I can't even use journalism in the same sentence. It's a dumpster fire of propaganda. It kind of goes back to that confirmation bias where if you're on the right, you're probably checking out Fox News to get your updates. If you're on the left, you might be checking out CNN or MSNBC. And they're telling you what you want to hear based on what you already believe. I would just encourage everybody to try to wean themselves off and have more conversations with real people, or listen to podcasts of people having conversations with real people and getting different perspectives and getting more in touch with your spirit, your spirituality, go deeper, the deepening place. Because when we're just in our minds all the time, we're just in this constant state of fear, and it's so unhealthy.
Yeah. And it, like, now more than ever, we're at a very fascinating time in human history where we actually can really no longer depend on our five senses to validate whether something is real or not, because we have artificial intelligence. We have, people have the capability to actually create videos of people using like snippets of their voice patterns and signature and on all different kind of things and make something look like something it's not. So where we are, there's such a capability for misleading and creating false propaganda, and it's something that they've used in North Korea with great success. They've told everyone that Kim Jong-il, he created the hamburger and cinema.
Oh, he did.
Right, he did, and that's where it came from, right? And that's what we believe. And so it's almost like in America, people like it, to use the cave analogy or even like the cardboard box analogy, like we're kind of in these cardboard boxes and hanging out with other people that believe what we believe. And then we've got a little hole cut out in it. And that's where the media is like, hey, look here. And we're only seeing one tiny little aspect of actually what's going on. And really the truth is so much bigger. I feel another elephant in the room is these conspiracy theories, because I do think that we need to talk about it because it's not really going away. In my own network of coaches and healers, I started to notice there was also a divide, people that had gotten really deep into like the deep state and Q and stuff like that. And I totally get going down the rabbit hole on that one, because it's almost like people have an intuitive sense. On some level, people know that they're being misled by the larger media. They're just like something's wrong. And so they're going to other places to look. But having my own military background and knowing that there are people that actually study the human condition, like even, in advertising, the military has a branch called PSYOPs, psychological operations.
Yeah.
And they're meant to get into your mind and know how the human being works so they know how to manipulate perspective. What I find interesting about conspiracy theories, in a way, I want to almost give credit to their genius because of their persuasive power to lead people on with certain details, like confirmation. Like if you see the National Guard training at this time, it's confirmation that this is about to go down. When the truth is that the National Guard always drills on this day and they always do this, but it's like they're being led to believe that they have certain information that no one else has. Now, is there truth to the conspiracy theories? I'm sure there probably is to some degree, but my personal feeling is that it's just a misdirection on a whole nother level where we need to start relying on our own intuition and our own sense of truth. So if something is sparking huge fear, like how do you feel if you read a conspiracy theory? What does it actually do? Well, it makes us feel powerless. Okay, and then what happens when we feel powerless? Well, it triggers our sympathetic nervous system into creating stress hormones. Then it diverts the blood flow from different parts of our brain. So where we're really into our like limbic system and our animal, like simply instinctual animal part, and where we've kind of gone into this unconscious mode where it's kind of kill or be killed. And we're not really using our cognitive function to be able to interact with life. And we're really not at our best. And so it actually, the way I see it, it causes more problems than it's actually solving anything. But who knows, like there are probably different groups or sects of people that their goal is chaos or is further division, or even the person that they're supporting, they have their own agenda. So perhaps what we've been seeing in Washington has actually been a collision or a grasp for power from opposing forces. I just don't believe that it's simply one group of people. I do believe that people that are in power, that want to remain in power, number one, probably aren't showing their faces. Number two, aren't going to get their hands dirty. And number three, would never rely on the fickle, I guess, political system where their balance of power would depend on whether it was one political party winning or the other. I just think it's beyond that. When we get into conspiracy theories and thinking and villainizing the other party and saying it's only them and they're corrupt, and the other side saying, no, it's them, they're corrupt, we're being divided, we're being misdirected, and also it's engendering a lot of fear and panic, which causes us all to feel powerless, and then we're truly of no use to anyone or ourselves.
I think you bring up a good point too about that inner child when you do feel powerless. I mean, the idea of someone having a plan and coming to the rescue is just so delicious.
Yeah.
And
oh my God. Yes.
it's not just that your God lost. If you're looking at people on the right, for so many of them, they believed that there was something bigger going on,
Yeah.
and that not only the right was going to be saved, but the left, they look at the left as just being blind, and the whole world was going to be saved.
Yeah.
And so if you can have compassion on that for a minute, I mean, these people are really, really hurting right now because the other guy got inaugurated.
Well, and they're scared, and like I do have a lot of compassion, because what I've seen is like pretty much everyone that I know, and I believe in the goodness of people. I believe in the goodness of Americans, and I believe that everyone truly does what's best for our country. I believe that everyone on the right that truly believe that Donald Trump was going to save us from a new world order, or to save us from this other agenda, this darker agenda. I totally can understand all of those mixed emotions about it, and even why they would believe it. When we know that something's going on and we can't put our finger on it, we're going to search for answers. And I think it's natural for us to grab onto things. And I can't even sit here and say that like none of that was true, because I just don't know. But what I think is more important, like what you said earlier, is that we really need to start tapping into our own intuition and unhooking from the triggers and the drama and the seductive pull of villainizing each other, and just getting into that charged state, because we really need to be in our powerful state. We need to use our own internal guidance system to really like look at what's true and what's not. And I know it sounds kind of challenging, because so many of us are not necessarily in touch with our own emotions or how to unhook from triggers and all of those things. But it's important to use our intelligence, our discernment, our logic, as well as our emotions and our intuition, to kind of suss out what's happening, instead of just digesting things that we see or learn about externally. Like, we really need to fact check it within ourselves and our own experience.
Yeah. I made a video yesterday about how this all seems like a really horrible divorce, and how kind of like the dad had been demonized all this time. And with the inauguration, it's like kind of the custody battle. The mom finally won, the dad's gone. And all the kids that were kind of aligned with the dad, it's like there's no healing. And to me, it's like you have to call off the dogs. You have to, if you're a leader, if you're Joe Biden, who keeps saying, I want unity, I believe you have to lead the way, and you have to stop demonizing the followers. It's over. He lost.
Yeah.
And also apply the same standard to the same types of things. If you're on the right and you see Antifa destroying the Democratic headquarters and Starbucks and all of that every night, and nobody says a word about that, but they keep harping on the 100 to 1,000 people that got in the Capitol out of, up to a couple of 100,000 people that were there, it feels like the world is against you. And, I've even heard some mainstream media people saying, how are we going to reprogram? Even as far as I think we need to think about taking children away from some of these. I mean, it's terrifying. Some of that rhetoric, if we could have some leadership in that way, that's the way we're going to build bridges, I believe.
That metaphor is like actually feels really accurate, because I mean, it's actually something I'm very familiar with in my own history. And that's actually the reason why I'm so very much like, well, let's look at all perspectives, and let's also look at the fact that no one is truly fully good or fully bad. Let's kind of look more at the deeper truth. And the most unfortunate thing, I think, so far is that the truth has been weaponized to a point where now people are questioning everything, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's also really chaotic. Like, people don't know where to turn, run, and it's, who do we trust? And the answer is, you need to learn to trust yourself. And you know this as well as I do. Like, the process of healing can be really confusing because what's been happening in our country is also like kind of a larger, like, macrocosm, if you will, of what happens internally during the healing process. So psychologically, it's really about our relationship to truth, right? And so psychologically, when there's been wounding and trauma, we have all these psychological processes that keep the truth of the subconscious from the conscious mind, because the subconscious is like, you can't handle the truth. And so we have repression, suppression, minimization, denial, all of the ways that the human animal will compartmentalize things to keep the truth hidden from itself for protection. It actually seems like the same thing that's been happening in the media or in the government. And it's just like, our relationship to truth needs to change in a way that we invite in some humility. So what we're trying to do, I believe, as a country and as individual organisms, is to build a bridge between our subconscious mind and our conscious mind so that we can open dialogue and really learn like what the truth is.
I think that's really important, and to compare it to like the internal healing process. You know, we want to go so far out. We want someone way out there to fix it for us. Mm-hmm. When really we just need to zoom in and get that balance within our own heart.
Yeah.
And fix the relationships around you. I can't tell you how many clients I had that said they felt like they had to cut off ties with their friends or family because their political beliefs were different.
Yeah.
And what I would always encourage them is, whatever it takes, even if your common ground is the size of a dinner plate, keep that and preserve it as a treasure. If we can get back to the point where we trust each other more than we trust the mainstream media who has an agenda, or more than these politicians whose power increases as we are divided, we have to get back to that.
I totally agree with that. And it is easy to want to cut ourselves off from relationships, but it is important to really learn to put the emotions aside and getting to like the heart of the matter. Like, what are their fears? What are their hopes? And instead of just like calling names and saying the other side is depraved or the other side is unconscious, and it's true for both sides in certain aspects. So we can't have progress when everyone else is an adversary. We have to view each other as friends. And
it goes back to our founding fathers, and what they elevated was, we the people have the power.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're divided, we don't have it. I think it's really up to us to start to mend and form some relationships. And honestly, I feel like there are 20 more directions that we could go in. But I'm going to post your post so that anyone who's interested in seeing the post that spurred this whole conversation, I'm going to put it on the Deepening Place site.
Should just read it in closing.
Yeah. Why don't you do that in closing? You can just read it.
So I'll read. I have 2 columns, and I have old way of doing things on the left and new way of doing things on the right. The old way of doing things: identifying ourselves with one political party or politician like we're picking teams. Hating others. Buying into fearful rhetoric. Cancel culture. The bullied becoming bullies. Believing everything we see, hear, or read regardless of the source. Spreading fear, lack, and hate. Targeting others that don't look, act, or believe like we do. Letting our fear decide that we should give up our freedom, or that it gives us the right to take others' freedoms away from them. And the new way of doing things: remembering that we're all on the same team and focusing on where we do have power and choice. Learning from the destructive behaviors of others, using our own discernment and intuition to navigate what's been presented, allowing others to be human, believing their intentions, forgiveness, but not blind acceptance, focusing on the energy of words and actions. Is it generative or destructive? spreading love, peace, generosity, and freedom. Remembering that we are all wearing the flesh suits we were born into and learning to love and accept ourselves and others.
In your caption for this post, I just thought it was so beautiful, and it really summed up kind of how I feel and what we've been talking about. And it's that we can each play a part to bring this country together, to remember that we are brothers and sisters, and not only the stewards of this land, but of each other's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I just thought that was a really great summary, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you reaching out so we could have this conversation.
Will you tell people how they can contact you on social media?
Oh, yes. So I am Epic Initiator on Instagram. Epic Initiator Coaching. My website is www.epicinitiator.com. The other thing I did want to say is I do have a group coaching course coming up called Deeper Dating, and it's really about self-love and intimacy, and also learning to attract love and build love, not from our wounds, but from our inspiration. So I just feel like it's also sort of timely that we do the work on ourselves so that we can just offer more love and compassion and generosity outside of ourselves to others.
Yeah, I do think that's really timely, and people can find more information about that
on my website, both, and on my Instagram. I have a link, so they can head to that and they'll see a link to a page that has my courses. And there's a whole write-up on the modules and everything we'll be covering. So that's starting February 17th, right after Valentine's Day, so that we can get into the work of like that juicy, deeper self-love. I also want to send my appreciation to you and the work that you're doing. It's so, so important and so good to just talk about these things and hear about people's individual perspective, and to just honor that as well. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, let's talk soon.
All right.
Okay,
deal.
Bye.
Bye.